Welcome to Your Thoughts, Your Reality with Michael Cole, the podcast that shines a compassionate light on the journey of veterans battling through life's challenges. Michael is a dual elite certified neuroencoding specialist in coaching and keynote training presentations, dedicated to guiding military veterans as they navigate the intricate pathways of post-deployment life. Join him as we delve into the profound realm of neuroencoding science, empowering these brave individuals to conquer universal battles, procrastination, self-doubt, fear, and more. Together, let's uncover the strength within you to re-engage with families and society, forging a new path forward.
Hello, hello, hello. Today we have a super special guest, Diana Parra. We were talking for, 30 minutes and had all these great conversations. So I think we're just done. Welcome, Diana. So Diana is a transformational coach, certified dual elite neuroencoding specialist, a licensed brain health trainer, certified behavioral consultant, certified grief educator, and I think I could go on the whole show. So super, super excited to have you on. Trauma is one of those very near and dear things that we have to deal with as humans, but especially as military veterans. So really looking to pick your brain and get some insights and so on. But before we dive back in, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on your show, Michael. I'm excited to be here. So yes, I'm a transformational coach and all the other things that Michael said. And I work mostly with women, and I help them to release the past, regain their confidence, and redefine their identity so they can let go of the past and basically create the life that they love.
Fantastic. And the work you do is so needed, for civilians as well as obviously military. So happy to have you on, and again, gonna pick that amazing brain of yours. So if you will, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming a grief educator?
Sure. So I had, I've experienced loss myself. Years ago, I had 4 miscarriages. And then I also experienced some health challenges. So it's kind of loss of your health. And I felt stuck. I got stuck, and I got to the point where my life wasn't moving forward. I, was depressed and just felt like not good enough, like a failure, unworthy, all those things. And so, I started doing my own work, and eventually I heard about this grief education certification and got really curious about it. Because what I was finding, with some of my clients, especially the women, is that they were stuck because they had some unprocessed grief. And so that was my case, I learned. And so through this certification, I just learned tons about grief and the process of grief and how to help people through grief. And it helped me. And now I can help my clients. And I'm very passionate now about educating people about grief, because there is a lot of stuff that we don't know about grief, right? In the process of grief, because we're not taught. And I mean, think about it. Most people don't want to talk about death, dying, grief, right? Those are subjects that we tend to avoid. And
Diana, so a lot of times, especially with veterans that I found, and it's everybody. I mean, especially like go back to your grandparents, the things that they went through, and they didn't talk about the bad stuff. They just buried it, right? Mm-hmm. And veterans, do the same thing, and not all. So please understand, I'm not doing a blanket statement here, but they they don't know how to process it. So they do the same thing. And a lot of veterans, especially back in my father's era, et cetera, they just buried it and didn't know how to deal with it. So the more that this work comes out and the amazing stuff you're doing, I mean, God bless you, lady. You're going to help so many, and have already.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And and it's a passion of mine, because I've learned so much myself, and things that I didn't know, so I know most people don't know those things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I've got a billion questions. A billion. We need 3 days. So if you can, where do we start? Why don't we maybe talk about the stages of grief? I think that'd be a great place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are 5 stages to grief. Those are like the, the books based on books, and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is the woman who, wrote about the 5 stages of grief. So they're denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance is the 5th one. Now, recently, my mentor, the one I did the grief education program with, he worked closely with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and he recently wrote the 6th stage, which I love, and it's finding meaning. Right? So, so there you go. Those are the 6 stages.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So do you want to go into each one of those a little bit? Just to explain.
Yeah, sure. So denial is, just what that is. It's kind of like, that feeling you can't believe it happened. You can't believe the person is gone. You can't believe that, whatever the thing is, the loss happened, right? And then the next one is anger. You get angry, right, about what happened, about the loss. Then we have bargaining, which is, can show up in different ways. But one of the ways is, if I had done X, then that wouldn't have happened. If I had been there, if I had not, told the person to go there or do this, right? And then there's depression, and then the 5th one is acceptance, which is where you accept what has happened. And then finding meaning is my favorite one, because it's really about finding meaning for yourself, right? For what, not necessarily like what does the loss mean necessarily, but more like what meaning can I find in this? For example, one of the things, I'll give you a personal example. When I lost my dad, he passed away. One of the things for me, finding meaning is when I think about him, I think about all the good things that he taught me, all the stuff that I learned from him, right? So that's the meaning for me, right? For someone else, it might be that they go and they start a nonprofit to help a certain population. That could be their meaning. For some people, it might be something as, simple as like planting a tree in their name. So it depends on, whatever meaning you want to give it. And yeah, and the other thing I have to say about the stages of grief, and this is a misconception, and sometimes people think that they're linear, like you go from one to the next, to the next, to the next, finally acceptance, and you're done, and they're not. Some people don't go through all of them. They skip around. Some people kind of go back to, one that they've already been through. So it's not a linear process, and grief, what I was saying to you before we started is that it's a personal journey. There is no specific timeline. There is no right or wrong way to do grief. It's very personal.
So some people will depending on it, it'll be 15 seconds. Some people will be 15 months. It really just depends. So, and I know we start talking about this, but I think it'd be a great thing to talk about again for everybody else to hear as well, is when is enough enough? And I know it's very personal. Give me some thoughts.
Yeah. And that's, that can be a tricky thing because it is a personal thing. Now, one thing that I learned about grief is that, after 3 months, you're not going to say, well, they should be over their grief and moving on, with life, right? And dating again or getting married, they're done grieving the loss of their spouse, move on, right? But if we're talking about something like past 2 years, again, and it also depends on the event, the loss. Now, if we have a traumatic loss, that's different, right? Because now we have the complication or the added thing of the trauma.
Right.
But again, it depends on the person. And, with my clients, I kind of, they kind of know when they're kind of getting stuck, if they're processing their grief, like without any other added, thing like trauma or anything like that, because they'll start to feel stuck. I mean, that's what happened to me after, the miscarriages and all that. And so they kind of start to feel like I should kind of be, not necessarily, I don't want to say over it, but like starting to move forward. And I can't. I want to, but I can't. Right.
So when you're bringing up just great stuff. So, so when they get to that feeling and they feel like they're stuck, they're saying, I'm stuck. I want to move on. I need to move on. What are some things that you do to help them?
So a lot of what I do with clients like that is education. It's really grief education. It's letting them know that the way they feel is normal, what they're feeling is normal. They're not doing anything wrong. And instead helping them to process, a little bit more of the grief and helping them in getting, unstuck. Because a lot of times when they get stuck, it's because there's unprocessed grief, right? And what I mean by unprocessed grief is, think about it. Most people or people nobody wants to feel bad, right? Nobody wants to feel pain. And so when we experience some kind of loss, that's what we feel, right? It's normal. There's pain. And so a lot of times we want to avoid feeling the pain. And so we want to move not through it, but around it. And instead we look towards like distractions. And, for me, I'll give you my example. After I had the miscarriages, I didn't really process my grief and I jumped right back into life. I wanted to get distracted. I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to feel the pain because it's overwhelming. It can be. Right. And so what happens is, we push it down, push it down. And there's only so much of that we can do before our body will say enough. And
what does that look like when your body's saying enough?
Well, in my case, I got sick. It can also be, it's our body and or also our mental health. We start getting depressed. We start feeling like, we don't want to do anything. We lose our joy for, living, for life, Yeah.
Yeah. And I've found that as well, that a lot of people, they start getting sick, they, the disease starts showing up that otherwise healthy person, those kinds of things as well. So excellent. So have you noticed, and I'm just going here. No, let me ask this a different way. So when you see someone that is depressed, going through these things, how do you keep that from becoming their identity because they're getting attention from it? And so that attention makes them feel good. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I have to say that, yes, so for some people that's the case, not for everyone, but for those that it is the case, it's basically, I ask this question that we all know and love is, what do you want? What do you want?
It's the $1 million question.
The $1 million question, yes. And then I help them figure out and get clarity around what it is that they want, right? Because they might be, that feeling depressed and all of that might be meeting some of their needs, right? But then it's really about helping them to understand how they can have those needs met in a more productive, more healthy way.
Right. So then do you start working on future pacing them and getting them excited about their future?
Yep. Future pacing them, it's a question like, what do you want? And then we take it from there. And then, we start, vision casting and future pacing, like what's the vision for your life, right? What do you want your life to look like? And is what you're doing now going to serve you? Is that going to get you to there,
Mm-hmm.
And really it's about helping them get clear and redefine what it is that they, what they want, redefine their identity in that process. And that's obviously a process.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you're dealing with somebody that has had, let's go, major trauma. Let's take a military type person that's been through something that they're having trouble forgiving themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what I found is a lot of military veterans and people in general, actually, I found it more common than I expected, have trouble looking at themselves in the mirror. We call it the mirror exercise, and saying, I love you,
Mm-hmm.
where you feel it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on how to get them past that?
And that's the thing, when there's trauma involved, it can get tricky, right? Mm-hmm. Because now we're also dealing with the trauma. And, for me, if I have let me just say this. I only work with a client that has trauma or is in the middle of trauma if they're also in therapy, because mm-hmm. the trauma has to be addressed by the therapy. I'm not an expert, trauma expert. That's not my field of expertise, but I can help them alongside their therapist to, they can work on, with the therapist, they can work on like the past, like what happened and all that stuff. And then I can help them start from where they are and move forward, into the future, right? Because that's more what coaching is,
Absolutely.
Going from the present to the future, and therapy is more about like talking about the past and how they got here to the present. So it's something that I would work in conjunction with the therapist and in helping them based on where they are in therapy and what they're ready for, helping them then start coming up with those goals, and that clarity about what it is that they want to build, what they want their life to be. And a lot of time, when there's trauma, it's like baby steps. It's little, we can't move them fast. Right. They have to go at their own pace. So it's kind of like, it might be something as simple as, going out in public by themselves, mm-hmm. For X amount of time, and then start building those increments, making it longer and longer. And things like that.
Excellent. Yeah, I the baby steps is a good point there. I think it has to be, especially when it's, in that trauma. And I just want to say something. I think it's amazing that you work with therapists in conjunction, because it's just going to help people just get further faster for sure. So thank you for doing that. And it's awesome that you found therapists that are good with that. And that's even cooler. And I know, and like in the Neurocoding Institute, we have people that are both and that kind of thing. Yeah. But I think it's just fantastic.
Yeah. And a lot of times it's, people will come to me for coaching. And then if, when I find out there's a lot of trauma there, or that it's still like unprocessed, and then I'll say to them, I will be more than happy to work with you, but you also need to be in therapy. And so that's kind of like where then I started a relationship with their therapist, and then we work together. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
Absolutely necessary, because for all kinds of reasons. So let me ask you this. So I know there's, people that are going through life transitions or divorce or empty nesters. So divorce, I understand, and empty nesters, loss of a job. So all of these can be forms of trauma. I mean, if they're affected by it and they're not finding the positive in them, is that your take on it?
Yeah, what I've learned about trauma is that, what I know about trauma is that if it's traumatic to you, then it's trauma, right? Because you and I might have the same experience, and it might be traumatic for you, but not for me. So we can't then say, well, it's not trauma, because, Diana's not experiencing it that way. So it really depends on, on the person's experience. And if it's traumatic for them, if it starts to impact their life in a certain way and they have the symptoms, of trauma and all that, then it's trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the definition. I mean, the definition you give it, right? Each person is going to give it a different definition. And I think that's where that comes from, my opinion anyway. You have different people in the same household. One goes down the road of not going to school and drugs and alcohol and, the worst case scenario, kills himself or someone else. The other one becomes, a CEO of his own $1 billion company. So it's really comes down to that. So my opinion. So do you see patterns between the way people give definitions? And I know everybody listening here, I'm throwing Diana some hard ones, okay? This is not, this is deep, okay? This is not just simple questions and answers here. I mean, they're not easy to answer. So Diana, thank you. And feel free to say I'm done with you at any minute. But I think they're, we have you on here, and I think it's important to get this kind of out there. Do you, so please, again, say it anytime. I'm done with you. But if you're good, please continue. Do you see patterns between those two different realms in the way people go?
Just clarify, like what two realms?
So you see one person, they have a rough upbringing. Okay, I'm gonna go a little bit to my childhood for that matter. Okay, rough upbringing, alcoholic, veteran in the household, broke up the family, and I'm not talking about my father, just to clarify. So one group or one sibling goes and runs away and ends up on heroin and all of these horrible things, and you have another one that goes through very similar things and builds a multi-million-dollar a year business.
Mm-hmm.
They take different roads. I'm curious if you have seen patterns between, with working with different people with trauma specifically.
Right.
Besides the definition they give it, have you seen different patterns?
I can't say that I've seen, patterns because I'm hesitant to say anything, to kind of answer that question, because I feel like in order for me to say there's a pattern or that I see a pattern, I would have to have worked with a large number of people. Do you know what I mean? Like that.
Sure.
What I will say is that I know what you're, referring to, where two people, from the same household and they deal or cope with, the situation in different ways. I think that's probably more about their resiliency, how resilient they are. And maybe throw in there some, personality, traits and how they cope, more like their coping mechanism, that's again, like you said, my opinion.
No, I'm being careful, and I appreciate you doing the same. I mean, you would need to work with those people specifically to give a professional analysis, I would think. But I was just curious if you've seen, certain patterns. But it seems like, hi, Aunt Shirley, by the way. Sorry, she shouted out. I had to say hi back.
Hi.
So, I was just curious if in your work, you've seen any kinds of those kind of pattern things. And I think what I've seen, and again, everybody is different. I'm going to be very careful as you were, but I've seen just resourcefulness and the definition of what they went through, because you'll see one person say, feel broken and go down that route. And you'll see another one saying, and I think what it is they're learning from it. And they're saying, yeah, I'm not going to be the same. This pattern changes here. My family is not going to be this. And so they take that different energy from it.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just winging it. Thank you, though. Thank you. So I didn't tell you we're going to do this. You ready for another one?
Oh, no.
No. So we're getting close to the end here. So Diana, first of all, you've been absolutely amazing, and thank you for going through this stuff. It is a very, very hard subject that, like you said in the beginning, most people don't want to deal with it and don't want to talk about it. But how much better is it when you do, right?
Yeah.
How much better is it when you do? So how do people get a hold of Diana Parra?
So you can visit my website at dianaparrainternational.com, and you can connect with me on Instagram, Diana Parra 888. That's my Instagram handle, and you can also find me on Facebook.
Fantastic. And just so everybody knows, I've been saying it wrong the whole time. It's Parra.
Yes.
I apologize for that.
It's fine.
I just thought I had it. Huh. So here's the part that I didn't tell you about is I always ask for 3 tips for people. And again, I like to specify veterans and or their families. And, everybody, the veterans' families, and I speak from, personal experience here, not just from my father, but another, vet that moved in to our household that I was just talking about later. We all deal with this stuff differently. And as not just the veterans, but their families, 3 tips here's the 3 tips to help with trauma, or how to deal with it if you feel like you're going down that route, even to circumvent it, something like that.
Yeah, I would say I would start with, I'll leave what I consider the most important one for last. But the first one I would say is to take care of yourself, as in take care of your health, take care of what you eat, drink plenty of water, and get plenty of sleep. The second one would be to try, and I know this is a difficult one, a challenging one, but try not to be hard on yourself and feel guilty for feeling the way you feel or for being where you're at. And then the third one is what I think is the most important one, is to seek professional help, and whether that's a therapist, a coach, or reach out to someone, start there so that you can get the support that you need.
Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, especially that last one. They're all good, but especially that last one. We know that our veterans, they need that camaraderie, and when they start to pull back, that's when the problems, and not just veterans, but their families and humans in general. Mm-hmm. That's when you start running into the serious problems. So reach out, talk to somebody, talk to your dad, talk to your brother, your sister. I don't care, your neighbor, your dog. You might not get a lot of feedback, but talk to somebody, get it out. So thank you so much. This has been absolutely fantastic. So I'd love to have you back on. I think we're just barely scratching the surface. So if you're up for that, I would love to do that.
Absolutely.
So everybody, again, Diana Parra. On the top right-hand corner of your screen there, you see a blue QR code. There are all kinds of resources. Again, books I've written for veterans and their families. There are, coaching and trainings and all kinds of stuff. Reach out, contact somebody. If you're struggling, please reach out. Just like Diana just said, it's super important. So I again want to thank you, Diana. I say this every time. I'm going to continue to say it probably every time, but as humans, time is the most precious resource we have. We do not get it back. Thank you so much for spending this 30 minutes here and 30 minutes off camera with me. You've been absolutely fantastic. I appreciate it, my friend.
Oh, thank you so much.
All right. So everybody, thank you for joining us, and we are out of here.
Thank you for joining us on another insightful journey of Your Thoughts, Your Reality podcast with your host, Michael Cole. We hope the conversation sparked some thoughts that resonate with you. To dive deeper into empowering your thoughts and enhancing your reality, visit empowerperformancestrategies.com. Remember, your thoughts shape your reality, so make them count. Until next time, stay inspired and keep creating the reality you desire. Catch you on the next episode.